New details on the finish to the AEW World Championship match this past Sunday at AEW Dynasty, as well as possible creative changes heading into the show. We have the ratings for last Saturday's edition of AEW Collision on TNT. We've also got the ratings for Tuesday's edition of WWE NXT on the CW. We have the viewership information for the March 31st episode of Monday Night Raw on Netflix. An update on Kamille's status with All Elite Wrestling. WWE President Nick Khan says it would be a mistake to respond to social media in terms of WWE's programming, and former TNA wrestling star Hammerstone says from his perception, it felt like TNA stopped caring about him. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of professional wrestling. Before we do, a reminder, you can subscribe. You can see the number right there. We're well over 20,600 subscribers. Be sure to subscribe and expand the Wrestle News universe. In addition, you can join the members of the WN365 roster by clicking the join button or clicking and scanning the QR code when it appears on the screen. You get your badges, your emojis, and your exclusive members-only content. Let's get straight in to possible changes to the outcome of AEW Dynasty when it comes to creative plans. Now, the AEW Dynasty show-ending segment, angle, whatever you want to call it, had many fans up in arms as Jon Moxley defeated Swerve Strickland to retain the AEW World Championship on Sunday. Now, for some reason, when word of Bryan Danielson being backstage emerged, many people implied that it was his call that Moxley retained. Either it wasn't, according to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, because every final decision in the company from an on-screen perspective comes down to the AEW president, CEO, and head of creative Tony Khan. One source joked to Fightful that if Bryan Danielson had that much creative say, he would have never won the AEW World Championship last year. It was reiterated that the decision was Tony Khan's. As far as the Young Bucks' involvement, there were many in the company who weren't sure exactly how long they would be out, and there had been some pitches from talent to work with them. They had been backstage for a show in California, but left before it started, and also for Christopher Daniels' final match in Cincinnati. Fightful say they asked sources in AEW if their involvement had been a long-term plan, and were told that, quote, wasn't something that anyone had heard, end quote, over previous months by one source, and, quote, it felt like we planted seeds for this one a while back by another. Now, Fightful have never heard that there was a plan for Swerve Strickland to win the AEW World Championship. To the contrary, Fightful say they've heard quite a while back that Jon Moxley had been set for a lengthy title reign from even before he won the AEW World Championship from Bryan Danielson. AEW reportedly internally has touted the success of the Death Riders and Moxley winning the title, citing a disconnect with online fans. AEW claims that the company's Live Plus DVR quarters have climbed throughout the year with Moxley as champion, peaking with the Moxley vs. Cope street fight. One theory in the company was that Switchblade Jay White was set for a heel turn ahead of his injury that sidelined him. It was implied that this could have tied into that night's main event. However, White's injury caused significant creative shifts last week, as Fightful had initially reported. Of course, the injury bug hit AEW hard ahead of AEW Dynasty. Switchblade Jay White, Orange Cassidy, and Brian Cage were all planned for AEW Dynasty before injury sidelined the AEW stars. Now, speaking of Dynasty, last Saturday, it was the Dynasty Go Home edition of AEW Collision on TNT. The AEW Collision Go Home show for the Dynasty pay-per-view featured matches that put the final touches for last Sunday's event, with stars like Mercedes Moné, Pac, Mike Bailey, and Max Caster among those who were in action. The show didn't move the needle much in terms of average overall viewership and, in fact, lost a small fraction of the audience from last week's episode, drawing 335,000 viewers down from 339,000 viewers the prior week, as per WrestleNomics. Collision's first show of April 2025 also lagged behind in the trailing 4-week average, which currently sits at 370,000 viewers. The key demographic rating for the show fell by 0.01 from last week's 0.09 to a 0.08, while down 0.202 from the trailing 4-week average. The show, the report claims, was number 3 for the night in the ratings, with ESPN's UFC Fight Night occupying the number 1 spot with a rating of a 0.30 and viewership of 715,000. Collision, which has witnessed a dip in viewership in January and the first half of February, did show some promising viewership numbers in March, as the two-night event on March 22nd and 23 drew over 500,000 viewers on each night, the former attracting 554,000 viewers and the latter attracting 584,000 viewers. Now, in terms of the quarter-hour ratings, this comes courtesy of WrestleNomics, so shout out to them and be sure to subscribe to their Patreon service. Now, the show's schedule will undergo a few changes in April, and it remains to be seen how these changes will affect the viewership numbers. Next week's show is set to air on Thursday, April 17, live, instead of its usual Saturday night time slots. While there have been some rumours and suggestions that a future episode could be extended to 3 hours, we'll just have to wait and see. Now, as you can see right here, it's actually gone against what we would usually see for AEW Collision. Usually you see AEW shows peak with the first segment and then drift off for the remainder of the show, but quite the opposite happened, with the lowest segment actually being the first segment and then actually peaking towards the end of the show. Now, according to WrestleNomics, the unusual pattern here may have been influenced by the men's college basketball Final Four games on CBS that aired throughout Collision. The first game ended early in the episode and the second game followed, but of course we get any more details or reasonings for this, we'll let you know in a future video. Now, let's talk about the ratings for Tuesday's edition of WWE NXT. NXT saw an increase in viewership on April 8th. According to WrestleNomics, NXT averaged 683,000 viewers on Tuesday. The show drew a 0.17 rating in the 18 to 49 demographic. The viewership is up from last week's episode, but an average of 650,000 viewers tuned in. The demo also rose from last week's show with a 0.15 rating in the same demographic. As for what happened on NXT this week's show kicked off with a match between Jordynne Grace and Jada Parker. It ended in a no contest after Stephanie Vaquer got involved at ringside. This led to the return of Julia, who took out everyone. Sol Ruca and Izzy Dame won their qualifying matches to compete in a 6-way ladder match for the vacant NXT North American Women's Championship at Stand and Deliver. Elsewhere on the show, Fraxium defeated Swipe Right in a non-title matchup. In the main event of the evening, Dark State defeated Obafemi, Trick Williams and Javon Evans when Williams and Femi couldn't get along, leaving Evans to get pinned. Now, let's move on to the viewership information for the March 31st episode of WWE Monday Night Raw on Netflix. After 2 consecutive weeks of Raw opening with John Cena cutting a promo followed by Cody Rhodes interrupting him, only for the two not to come to blows, it was safe to wonder if some fans were beginning to get restless with the top WrestleMania storyline. At least in terms of viewership, however, Netflix numbers showed that Raw was staying consistent, hovering at around 3 million viewers week over week, and suggesting that would remain the case for Cena and Rhodes' next interaction on March 31st. As it turns out, this wasn't quite the case. WrestleNomics is reporting that the March 31st Raw drew 2.9 million views over the course of the week, along with 5.9 million hours viewed. While hours viewed was up from the 5.6 million hours viewed on March 24th, the total views was down from 3 million. This was the second consecutive week that Raw saw a slight dip in total views, and the first week Raw didn't draw 3 million views or more since Cena's heel turn at Elimination Chamber on March 1st. The biggest decline Raw saw, however, was in Netflix's weekly ratings, where the program had found itself ranked in the top 5, both worldwide and in the United States, the prior 2 weeks. That wasn't the case this time, with Raw remaining in the top 10, but falling to 8th globally and 6th in the United States. It was the lowest Raw found itself ranked in either list since February 24th, the last Raw prior to Cena's turn. Cena and Rhodes' confrontation played out a bit differently than previous weeks. Both got personal with one another, with Vince McMahon, Tony Khan and The Rock being referenced before Rhodes laid out Cena with a crossroads, earning some retribution for Cena's Elimination Chamber attack. Switching back over to AEW, and a bit of an update when it comes to the former NWA World Women's Champion Kamille and her status with the company. During the first few months following Mercedes Moné's TBS Championship reign, she was accompanied by Kamille, who served as her muscle until the two split. While the angle went nowhere, many believed that Kamille would end up receiving a huge push and even potentially being the one to dethrone Moné for the TBS Championship, but she hasn't competed since October of last year. According to Dave Meltzer, on the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer Radio, Camille's future in AEW might be in jeopardy. In hindsight, Meltzer noted that it might have been even better for Kamille to instead go to NXT instead of AEW and first learn the craft. Quote, they didn't do anything with her. She came in, she had that terrible match, and then it was kind of like they pretty much gave up on her at that point, he had an opinion of. He said, quote, I think they may have not understood the level she was at, you know. He added before explaining why he thinks there was a misconception of what Kamille could bring to AEW. Quote, with AEW, because it's such a wrestling-focused promotion, when someone isn't good, because most of the people are really good, even on the women's side, it's really noticeable when someone is bad. Interestingly, during a podcast appearance last month, Tony Khan was asked about Kamille. He gave a storyline answer and simply recapped how she was attacked backstage, but suggested she could be back on television at some point, and that he believes it'll be interesting to see what she does in AEW by then. Now, WWE President Nick Khan had some interesting comments about how WWE maybe responds to fans on social media. Fans consume wrestling in a variety of ways in 2025, and anyone with a social media platform can give their immediate thoughts on the product. While many wrestlers are online and some will engage in criticisms or praise, WWE President Nick Khan believes it's important to not always react to what's happening on social media in what's presented on television. Quote, "We won't respond to social media. It's a mistake to respond to that. We have to trust our gut," Khan said at the NAB show in Las Vegas. It was noted that Nick was speaking on social media being a small microcosm of the entire fan base, as Triple H added in that they get to see reactions every night at shows. Of course, WWE officials are in Las Vegas ahead of WrestleMania 41. And finally, an interesting reaction here when it comes to former TNA wrestling star Hammerstone. Now, Hammerstone was brought into TNA wrestling at Hard to Kill 2024 to take on Josh Alexander. 1 month later, Hammerstone had signed a deal with TNA Wrestling. Hammerstone was often on television throughout the year, most notably in a feud with Steve Macklin and competing in Ultimate X at TNA Emergence. In March of this year, Hammerstone announced his TNA contract had expired and he was a free agent. Quote, "At a certain point, perception is reality," Hammerstone told Zach Haydorn of Sports Illustrated's The Takedown. Quote, "So I'm sitting there and from my perception, I felt like the company stopped caring about me and maybe I needed to do something in a different way. Maybe they were looking for something that I wasn't giving them. But also, that was never a consideration or a conversation that was had. I'd be very happy to be sat down and told, hey, creatively, this is what we want you to do. So we need to see more of this out of you." And I never got that. It was just like, hey, where are we going creatively? And a lot of the time it's like, well, you know what we're doing with this guy, you know what we're doing with that guy. So why don't you know what you're doing with me? For TNA's 2024 End of Year Awards, Hammerstone's bout against Josh Alexander didn't make the poll to be voted on by fans. Quote, "Whether that's a minority of fans or not, I don't care if I lose the poll, just put me on the poll." So it got to a point where I felt like there was a loss of faith in me, and I don't know where that came from, but I could be way off there, and I'm not blaming anybody except myself, but once you start to perceive things like that, that becomes reality. So it's like, if this company doesn't have faith, I mean, why should I even have faith in myself if they don't have direction for me? Why should I try so hard? It's not to say that I ever gave up, but mentally, I just felt beat down. Now, Hammerstone would return to MLW at the MLW Battle Riot 7 show. Now, guys, be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. A reminder, you can subscribe, join the WN 365 roster, click that join button, subscribe, expand the Wrestle News universe. You can see all of the upcoming watch-alongs and post-shows in the sidebar, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.